Now, Western politicians and mainstream media want you to hate Iran. If you listen to Trump, Netanyahu, or any US politician talking about the Middle East, they always say the same thing. Iran must not have a nuclear weapon because it's the biggest threat to the region's security. But upon simple analysis, the exact opposite is true. The Middle East and the entire world would likely be a much safer place if Iran had a nuclear bomb. Now, I know this sounds crazy, and you're probably thinking, how could a country like Iran, having access to such a destructive weapon, possibly make things safer? But the truth is far more complex. The answer is deterrence, and it's the sole reason the Soviet Union and the United States never fought World War III. In a perfect world, yes, there would be fewer weapons, but we don't live in a perfect world, and that idealism ignores the reality of the geopolitical situation. Right now, Israel holds an estimated 90 nuclear warheads. This gives them an entirely disproportionate advantage in the region, and it's exactly why Israel can do whatever they want without any consequences. It's no surprise that Israel right now is bombing 4 separate countries, while simultaneously carrying out a 2-year-long genocide against the Palestinian people. But their main target, it's Iran. And that's why just a few weeks ago, they launched an unprovoked attack against them for pursuing nuclear weapons that the country doesn't even have. But what if they did? In today's video, we're going to break down exactly what this scenario would look like. Let's be honest. Israel is fighting for regime change in Iran. This has been the focal point of Israel's foreign policy for the past 3 decades. The current Israeli government believes the majority of the land in the region was promised to them by God, and that they are the chosen people. Key cabinet officials openly call for the expansion of Israel's borders to those described in the Bible as part of Greater Israel. That includes much of modern-day Egypt and Syria. And this isn't mere rhetoric either. Israel has already annexed several territories in Syria. This right-wing extremist government's desire to expand its territory for its chosen people follows the exact same playbook as fascist regimes in the past. Think of Hitler's push eastward for Lebensraum, or living space for the Aryan Germans, or Mussolini's quest to build what he called a new Roman Empire across much of northern Africa. But instead of racial superiority, Israeli ultra-Zionists use a theocratic approach, claiming these lands were promised to them by God. To secure what they believe to be their divine destiny, the Israelis must remove any impediments in the region that could challenge this goal. And to ensure this, every government in the region must be destabilized. Israel has a population of only 9 million people, so they can't take on their neighbors alone. And this is where the United States comes in. Through AIPAC, Israel dominates US politics, buying the loyalty of the vast majority of US politicians. This influence is so strong that American politicians openly wear Israeli military uniforms to Congress, fly Israeli flags outside congressional offices, and advocate for Israel's interest over those of Americans. You have one of the most recognizable American politicians in Ted Cruz stating that one of his largest goals in politics was to support the interests of a foreign nation.
I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate. And I've worked every day to do that.
Such actions would be unimaginable if you were to replicate them with any other country. This political capture has enabled Israel to receive billions from the US every year, totaling over $305 billion in US aid since 1951. As a result, the US has been dragged into countless conflicts in the Middle East against Israel's neighbors. Just listen to General Wesley Clark explain America's plan to take out all of Israel's adversaries.
See him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me."
Nearly all of these countries have been neutralized. Iraq was taken out on the lie of them having weapons of mass destruction. Libya was destroyed by a NATO bombing campaign, leaving it completely destabilized. Somalia is a failed state. Sudan is facing a civil war. Syria was overthrown with US and Israeli backing, and Hezbollah in Lebanon has largely been incapacitated. The last remaining obstacle? Iran. Currently, Iran is a fully sovereign nation, independent of US and Israeli influence. In 1953, Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh sought to nationalize Iran's oil, taking control away from British Petroleum. As a result, he was overthrown in a coup backed by both the United States and Britain. The US then installed the Shah, whose dictatorship lasted until the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Since then, Iran has remained firmly outside US control, prompting the US to impose crippling sanctions on the country's economy. These sanctions have devastated Iran's currency and hindered their ability to import critical goods, including life-saving medicine. Despite these challenges, Iran has shown remarkable resilience. The country has become largely self-sufficient by developing many products on its own. They have also pursued alternatives to Western partnerships, with China's Belt and Road Initiative and joining the BRICS network. Iran has also been a vocal critic of Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, leading them to armed resistance groups in Palestine, Yemen, and Lebanon. As a result, Iran stands as the largest and last remaining obstacle to Israel's total dominance in the region. And with Trump in office, Israel finally had a US president willing to greenlight and support their offensive strikes on Iran, aiming to take out the final domino. Israel didn't just strike military targets, but extended targets to police stations, telecommunications, and other civilian infrastructure, with the intention of causing regime change. But these attacks only emboldened the Iranian people, rallying them behind their government. Israeli and US intelligence were under the false impression that all Iran needed was a slight push, and the Iranian people would overthrow their government for them. They believed the same thing in Iraq in 2003, where they thought the Iraqis would welcome them as liberators, but instead faced a decade-long insurgency. Western arrogance is in full display when they bomb a country claiming they're doing it to help the people. While it is true that there is discontent in Iran, especially among younger generations, the simple truth is that changes have already happened in the country, and modern-day Iran is very different from what Western media wants you to believe. Just look at this footage that went viral across social media, showcasing a side of Iran that most Westerners never see. Modern streets, ladies walking around scarfless, or with a scarf on their shoulders. Nearly 70% of Iran's science and engineering graduates are now women, and in the medical industry, men made up 70% of the country's medical students and physicians about 20 years ago. But women have reversed the situation and now account for 70% of Iran's medical students. Yet Western leaders claim to want to help these women by killing them daily in Iran and Gaza. Iran has its problems, but change should always come from the people within the country. You cannot bomb or impose regime change to create lasting transformation. History has shown time and time again that this only leads to death, destruction, and instability. In response to the illegal attacks on its sovereignty, Iran launched a 2-week-long missile assault on Israel. These strikes revealed the failure of Israel's Iron Dome and caused significant damage to Israeli infrastructure and the economy. Currently, both countries have agreed to a very fragile ceasefire, but many geopolitical analysts believe that this conflict is bound to flare up again in the future. It's only just a matter of time. This is because Israel's overreaching objectives have not been achieved. They will not stop attacking Iran until there is a government subservient to Israel. And this is where the concept of Iran acquiring a nuclear deterrent becomes crucial. The only reason Israel is able to act with such aggressive tactics is because it is the only actor in the region with nuclear weapons. If Iran were to obtain a nuclear weapon, it would completely alter the geopolitics of the region. The theory of mutually assured destruction, MAD, comes into play. This principle maintains peace by establishing that if one country uses nuclear weapons to destroy the other, both will be obliterated in the process, a lose-lose situation for both. The threat of this outcome keeps countries from provoking a conflict, and this is arguably the primary reason the US and Soviet Union never went from a cold to a hot war. It's also a large reason why the US has not launched a direct military conflict with China despite ongoing hostility. And you don't have to look at superpowers to see nuclear deterrence in action. The same logic applies to smaller states defying US influence. Let me give you 2 real-world case studies that illustrate how nuclear deterrence works. First, let's look at Libya. Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya once had the highest quality of life in all of Africa. Gaddafi was an anti-imperialist and pan-Arab leader. Although he ruled with absolute power, his policies led to a significant improvement in the living standards of the Libyan people. He prioritized redistributing the country's resources, like its vast oil reserves, to benefit his people rather than Western corporations. As a result, universities, healthcare, and electricity were all free. This is the same crime that led to the overthrow of Iran's former leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, in the 1953 coup. Understanding the danger of opposing the US, Gaddafi began developing a nuclear weapons program to ensure Libya's regional power and independence. In 2003, after witnessing the invasion of Iraq and the fate of Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi agreed to abandon Libya's nuclear program. But this proved to be a fatal mistake for Gaddafi, who met a violent and brutal death as a direct result. Western-backed rebel groups and a 2011 NATO bombing campaign turned Libya into rubble. A country that once boasted the highest quality of life in Africa now has open-air slave markets. For over a decade, Libya has been a failed state, torn apart by endless conflict and instability. The West, however, doesn't care, as long as Libya is no longer a threat to Israel. If Libya had not given up its nuclear program, there's almost no chance the West would have dared to launch such a bombing campaign and interfere in Libya's internal affairs. And this brings us to the second case study, North Korea, which, interesting enough, the United States government has left alone over the years. The US cannot engage with North Korea in the same way it does with other countries, because it knows that North Korea has the ability to respond proportionally to any provocations. As a result, the US largely ignores North Korea, focusing on strangling it economically with sanctions. Despite North Korea's ideological opposition to the US, the nuclear deterrent has kept it alive. Without it, there's a high likelihood that North Korea wouldn't exist today. Libya and North Korea serve as case studies for the two different paths Iran can take in response to being a prime target of the West. America has proven that the only way for a country to gain genuine respect as a sovereign nation is through a nuclear deterrent. Without it, you are not truly sovereign. Your existence depends entirely on Washington's view of your country. Now, if you argue that Iran should not have nuclear weapons, you must first explain why Israel, or even the US, should be allowed to possess them. What makes a country qualified to have a nuclear weapon? The logical criteria should be rationality and peacefulness, yet both the US and Israel are objectively warmongers. Since October 7th, 2023, Israel has carried out more than 17,000 attacks across 5 countries, including the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. Israel is also approaching 2 years of committing genocide against the Palestinian people, the most heinous crime a nation can commit. The death toll is estimated to be around 100,000 people, with some estimates putting secondary deaths in the hundreds of thousands. Israel also launched an illegal first strike on Iran, which is a violation of international law. Only 4 countries in the world have refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. Those countries are North Korea, India, Pakistan, and of course, Israel. In addition, Israel does not cooperate with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who seeks to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy and inspect military usage. Israel refuses to allow these inspectors to examine its nuclear facilities, which remain shrouded in secrecy. In contrast, Iran as a modern state has never initiated a war. It is a member of both the NPT and the IAEA, and has passed frequent and thorough inspections of its nuclear program. Iran adhered to the successful Iran nuclear deal until the US unilaterally withdrew, further undermining trust in the negotiations with the US. Iran has also consistently proven itself to be a rational actor. After the United States illegally assassinated its top general, Qasem Soleimani, during Trump's first administration in 2020, Iran understood that it had to respond to preserve its sovereignty and national dignity. In the face of an illegal act of aggression, Iran chose pragmatism. Instead of escalating to direct conflict, Iran fired missiles in the desert near an American military base, warning the US in advance to ensure that no one was in harm's way. They repeated this strategy in June 2025 in response to another illegal provocation, where the US launched bunker busters on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran warned the United States ahead of time and targeted empty land near American bases. These are the actions of a clearly rational actor. It requires immense patience and rationality to respond to blatant aggression in such a measured way. The US essentially begged Iran to retaliate, but Iran didn't take the bait. Iran now has every motivation to acquire a nuclear weapon, and it's clear why. A nuclear weapon has proven to be the only way to have sovereignty respected, and the only real deterrent against further aggression from Israel and the United States. Warhawks advocating for regime change in Iran want you to believe that if Iran were to obtain a nuclear weapon, it would immediately launch it against Tel Aviv or New York. But this makes no sense whatsoever. It would take years for Iran to develop even a small number of weapons, and the only purpose for acquiring nuclear weapons will be to deter further aggression, not to strike first. If Iran were to initiate a nuclear first strike, it would ensure its complete annihilation by the US. As a result, its obvious and stated intentions are only to acquire a small number of weapons for deterrence against further Israeli aggression. History has proven Iran to be unaggressive and rational. Everything used to falsely portray Iran ironically describes Israel perfectly. Iran is painted as a theocratic regime, the main cause of instability in the region and the largest state sponsor of terrorism. In reality, Israel is run by a fanatical theocratic government. Its leader Netanyahu has even said the world would go down with Israel. Israel is undoubtedly the largest destabilizing force in the region, having launched wars against every single one of its neighbors, and unfortunately dragging the United States along with it. And lastly, Israel has sponsored numerous terrorist attacks, including detonating explosive pagers and radios in public markets, killing multiple children, an attack described by UN experts as a terrifying violation of international law, and recently setting off car bombs in civilian neighborhoods in Tehran. Every accusation is a confession. While Israel's military dominance in the region allows it to manipulate the political landscape, Iran remains steadfast in its defense of its independence. The pursuit of a nuclear deterrent is not an act of aggression, but a rational response to the systematic threats it faces from Israel and the US. The way forward must involve a recognition of Iran's legitimate security concerns and a move towards a more balanced, peaceful approach to the Middle East. Only then can we hope to break the cycle of violence and instability that has plagued the region for decades. Iran's nuclear ambitions, far from being a cause for alarm, could be the key to a more stable and secure future, not only for Iran, but for the entire region. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into this complex situation in Iran. As always, we're going to continue following this story because most likely this ceasefire will not last forever. There is no doubt that there will be continued beef and animosity between Israel and Iran, and most definitely you can count on this YouTube channel to bring you all things geopolitics. Everyone, if you made it to this point of the video, thank you for your support. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop me a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's presentation. But most importantly, I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.